this huge an entertainment spectacle brings together sort of a lot of men with a lot of money from around the globe with very little accountability. You know, not many of those guys are bringing their families to the Super Bowl with them. And because of that, it ran the risk of a higher degree of human trafficking. So we really got out ahead of that.
Sunday was certainly an historic day for Tampa Bay, as our Tampa Bay Buccaneers made history by winning Super Bowl 55. And amid all the excitement and exhilaration leading up to the big day, and our endeavors to make it safe and a secure experience for everyone visiting Tampa, we were also working behind the scenes to zero in on human trafficking and those who sexually exploit others. The sickening practice of human trafficking is a crime that is nothing less than modern-day slavery.
During the 2015 Super Bowl, ASU professor Dominique Rose-Sepowitz studied the impacts of what happens around the crime of human trafficking and the big game.
We were able to see an influx in sex ads. We were able to see data that showed more things were happening.
But finding data making it the largest human trafficking event, the conclusion of the research is inconclusive.
Sex trafficking happens during the Super Bowl, and it is important for us to pay attention to, but we just don't have that answer.
My experience as a police officer in the Bay Area in California was that we're just one stop on a nationwide track where this is occurring, and in many different locations within those cities. So you can have people, or really you have traffickers and pimps bringing their victims through major cities and major stops throughout the nation, ours just being one of them. And so when you have major sporting events, of course, this is bringing in a large amount of people, and what does that mean for them? It's business. So this occurs with every major sporting event. You can expect it to happen, but it's also happening at the massage parlor. It's also happening in the house down the street, because the way to get to these people and to hide from law enforcement is to advertise online. It's very hard to follow online. It's much easier to stop somebody on the street, for example. So, but unfortunately, a lot of those police powers are being taken away, especially as we know in California, they just keep knocking down laws. So for example, just this last year, there was on the books 647B and PC, Penal Code 647B, and you had the authority to stop anyone that you thought was loitering for the purposes of prostitution. So this is what you're stopping someone for. From there, you learn that this person is 12 years old, 13 years old. Sometimes they can look a lot older than what they actually are. If you take that tool away from law enforcement, it makes it exponentially more difficult to stop these girls and to figure out what's really going on behind the scenes. Now a lot of it has gone online as well, as I mentioned. And as soon as those websites get discovered and they start arresting people from there, they'll just take that website down and start up another. So it's a problem. It will continue to be a problem that is not only on the street or in the massage parlor, or this is a problem that has infiltrated our government. And why do I say that? Is because there is you look at Jeffrey Epstein and you look at all the people that are being protected for being pedophiles and for trafficking these children and young women, young boys, from state to state, from country to country, and making rounds around the United States for all kinds of nefarious reasons and activity. Yeah, so one might ask, is there really a problem at the Super Bowl? Is there really a problem at any of these large sporting events? If you look at the arrests made with those charges compared to other days, and you see that there are 80 arrests during Super Bowl weekend for human trafficking or prostitution type issues, I can tell you that that isn't possible without the police department making the resources for those officers to be available. Because most of the time, the officer is answering calls for service unless you're in a specialized unit. And so if you're answering calls for service, you're not particularly looking for human trafficking events, or you may see a girl walking down the street and assess that it's possible that she's a prostitute, or it's possible that she could be being trafficked by someone. You don't know until you start talking to that person. But just know that that volume of arrests can't be made unless the resources are there to make it happen. The resources aren't there to make it happen unless someone has thought ahead and allotted for that to happen. So just by that data alone, you know that those things are occurring. In a lot of departments, they have human trafficking units, and those are usually grant funded by the government, and they'll tell you how many officers that you can have in that unit, and those are the types of detectives that are probably out there, depending on the department, of course, because you have a large department like Oakland. Yeah, of course they have a human trafficking division, and they have a lot of people that can work overtime, say, to go work on these operations. Or you have a smaller department like Richmond, California, and you may not be able to have that many resources, but also it's a smaller city. But the point of the matter is that can't happen without having the resources for them to do so. So it's absolutely happening.
I used to work operations regularly for prostitution, and if I may just say, I just thought it was all the way that the police department I just thought it was all a joke. It's like, I'm trying to do my job, we're all trying to do our job, and the things that they give us, the money or the resources, is just not enough. It was a joke because it's like, oh, you can do this, but you can't do that. Or if they will give you, human trafficking is not something that you can do an operation here and there and think that you're going to attack something, right? It's like, it's not this Saturday we're going to go out, or this Super Bowl. It's like an all the time thing. There needs to be a task force that does that on the regular. And the only place I knew in California that had that was in Orange County, where Disneyland is. And that is because what happens there, you can imagine, the demand for human trafficking in Anaheim is huge, which is why I believe they have this task force. And that's what they do every day they go to work. That's what we wanted to do back in Richmond, but the resources weren't there, as you can imagine. And that was one of the larger cities in my county. So you can only imagine everybody else has none also. So once a year in June, they would try to appease us with bringing the FBI, and we did a task force, like a yearly thing. But again, it was just a joke. It's like, the things don't work out like that. You have to put time into it and resources for you to really affect a change. Otherwise, we're just playing here. Defunding the police only made it worse, because first, when you used to have detectives, now you have removed their funding, so now you have no detectives. Now everyone works patrol. And what happens in patrol? You go from call to call. There is no investigating anything. you don't have time for that, because guess what? You have to go to the next shooting, the next stabbing, the next accident, you name it, and it's nonstop there. So without the resources allocated specifically for that unit, if every police department had a human trafficking unit that worked on it day and night, then we can talk about maybe affecting some change. Again, if I can imagine in a perfect world, every police department having their own detective unit that is for human trafficking only, and that person in charge of that unit gets to communicate with all the other ones, so there's a liaison. And I mean, and a database that we can have to where we all collect all the information and we're throwing it in there daily, weekly, however it is that we collected. But as of now, or as of when I left the police force in 2020, that wasn't a thing. And I worked in one of the better states, you can say, that we pride ourselves for being, having the best training and the best everything in California as it comes to being in law enforcement, but really it's just a joke. Smoke and mirrors, that's all it is.
Allison, we do hear these warning bells ahead of things like the Super Bowl because of the influx of visitors and crowds. And California is considered especially vulnerable because it's so close to airports, international borders, has a high immigrant population.
December of 2022 until the end of January right now in 2023, we've seen quite a bit of uptick when it comes to the amount of people that are crossing our particular border, which is down to the Yuma sector. We've seen a lot of people. A lot of family units this time, and a lot of single male units. That's what we're seeing most of. Obviously, when it comes to the amount of traffic that we get through, we're seeing between 2,000 to 2,500 a day is what Border Patrol is reporting. Is there an increase in fentanyl? Absolutely, there's an increase in fentanyl. We're spending all of our resources trying to catch these people that are coming across and giving themselves up. Meanwhile, all of the fentanyl and other drugs that come across the border are going a different route. And so that's very difficult to stop. There's been a tremendous amount of seizures lately of fentanyl, especially fentanyl pills, coming across the border by the hundreds of thousands. And so, I mean, they're getting it from in tires and cars to those things because there's so many of the resources that are tied up to the human trafficking side of things and the illegal immigration that everybody now thinks it's a great opportunity to get drugs into the country even more. So we've seen those two things that have been a huge influx since the end of last year. Do you think the Super Bowl plays a role in that? That's a great question. I'm not sure that really the Super Bowl would play a role in that. I'm not sure how many people actually come across the border illegally are here simply because they're going to come and try to get to the Super Bowl. So that's one facet. I don't think that it would be related at all, but let me say it this way. So whenever we have a large event like the Super Bowl in an area, we plan years in advance and put together task force for specifically human and sex trafficking. We know that these people come from out of state. You know, they come from all over the country. They come in for about a 1 to 2 week period of time. They have very organized crime when it comes to sex trafficking and prostitution. Obviously, with that comes drugs as well. And so we know that there's a huge influx. So we already know our task force have been working 1 to 2 years in the past for this particular Super Bowl. And I can tell you that the task force that are assigned to Super Bowls and major events like this are already working for next year in Las Vegas, where the Super Bowl is going to be held. So this is something that we do on a normal basis, and we work with our local and federal partners to put those types of task force together because we know that it happens.
Startling statistics, sex trafficking generated $99 billion in illegal profits worldwide. 1/3 of the victims are children, and in the U.S., 83% of people being sex trafficked are U.S. citizens. And there's been this long perception that the Super Bowl is the biggest human trafficking event. There were 494 arrests of traffickers and buyers leading up to the Super Bowl in Los Angeles last year. And you've probably seen anti-human trafficking billboards and other awareness campaigns leading up to this year's Super Bowl in the Valley.
Hi, I'm Craig Solman Sawyer. I'm the founder of Veterans for Child Rescue, a nonprofit organization founded specifically to expose and combat child trafficking here in the continental United States. And we're here at Super Bowl 57 in Phoenix, Arizona, to observe those who are seeking children and predators who are seeking sex with minors around this event. So what we're expecting is what we see around so many of these big events where you have a lot of men converging on a city for a big public event. There are people who cater to those needs, to the entertainment needs of the crowd. And sex trafficking is one of those crimes that is involved in the catering to the entertainment, if you will. And a growing percentage of that sex trafficking is now children. And that's where Vets for Child Rescue comes in. We watch and see those that are online seeking sex with children, on phones, on whatever media platform, seeking sex with children. They incriminate themselves in doing so. And we catch them and we turn them over to law enforcement, have them arrested and prosecuted for those crimes to protect the children. And since the average number of children that a predator harms throughout their lifetime is 70, every child predator that we can catch and put in prison to rape no more represents a list of children who will be spared that harm. So it's an important mission and we enjoy doing it, and that's why we're here. And actually the stadium's in Glendale, Arizona, but it's just adjacent to Phoenix, and that's where we're going to be all weekend, running our operations and turning the predators over to law enforcement. Some of the things anyone can look for to spot children in harm's way are children that don't look like they're with their biological family. They don't look happy. They may not look well cared for. They just don't have the countenance of being with their family on a vacation or something. If you see children being brought in and out of hotel rooms and a lot of men coming in and out, or they're brought in and out through the dark of night in Airbnb rental homes, things like that, take a closer look and see if it might look like child trafficking. We have a list of tools and knowledge on vetsforchildrescue.org. The website is v4cr.org. You can go there and see what to look for and how to report it to law enforcement so that you can be part of the preventive process to intervene and start filming license plates, faces, and children's faces and things like that, so that if law enforcement determine that that is a child trafficking situation, they can intervene and help us rescue the children and put the predators behind bars where they can harm no more. A lot of the attendees of these type of big events, instead of renting hotel rooms, will rent rental homes, Airbnb style rentals. And from there they order whatever entertainment they want. And some of that is sex trafficking, some of that is now child trafficking, along with the food and whatever else. So if you're near one of these homes, just keep an eye out and see if what's happening there involves children and if the children might be in harm's way. And if you could pick up on that and make an effective report, you can be part of helping rescue and spare those children from harm.
When it comes to the topic of human trafficking, I think that we need more information out there. I think you can never have too much. I think education and knowledge is very important in this topic because it affects everybody in every state and every country. And the more that we put this word out there, the better off that we can say something when we see something that's not right.
Exactly. I echo everything he just said. It's a great cause. You hear little trickles about like just information, how to, if you see something out of the norm, say something and stuff like that, but I don't think it's enough. And education is the best key to keep people prepared for things like this, because you never know when it could happen, where it could happen, and especially with events like this, crowds this size, things like that, it kind of heightens that awareness a little bit more if you're educated about it. So definitely, but we're all here, it's all love, Super Bowl Sunday, great event, welcome to Phoenix.